September 1996. Still working at Illyria Arts. As a picture framer, still don't remember anything else that was going on in my life. So let's get to the books. First book I read in September of 1996 was Star Wars Shadows of the Empire by Steve Perry. This story takes place between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I had to think about that for a second. And it introduces us to Prince Xizor of the Black Sun, a criminal organization. We've got Luke and Leia and Lando and Chewie and all those people. They're trying to figure out how they're going to rescue Han Solo, who has been frozen in carbonite and taken away by Boba Fett. Meanwhile, Prince Xizor is trying to take down Darth Vader because Vader killed his family, I believe. But it introduces Xizor as a really interesting character. And the Black Sun I thought was pretty interesting, this criminal organization going on within the Empire. All in all, not a bad Star Wars novel. Number 2, Memoirs of an Invisible Man by H.F. Saint. And this is the second time I read this. And so this is about a guy. I don't remember what his occupation is, why he's at this building where there's some stuff going on and there's an explosion or something and he gets caught in it and it turns him invisible. And this is just the story of him dealing with being invisible, how he's going to live his life. And meanwhile, of course, the government is after him, trying to catch him. Pretty good book. Made into a movie with Chevy Chase. The movie's not nearly as good as the book. Number 3, Spider-Man, Goblin's Revenge by Dean Wesley Smith. This is the follow-up to Spider-Man Carnage in New York. It actually starts right where Carnage in New York left off. So there was this serum that was driving people insane. Spider-Man got it at the end of Carnage in New York. But it's stolen again. Thought I was going to sneeze. I meant to say at the beginning of this video, I still have a cold. So I apologize for any sniffing, coughing, throat clearing, sneezing. That's going to go on. And it really felt like there was a sneeze coming. But anyway, back to Spider-Man Goblin's Revenge. So Spider-Man, Peter Parker's not getting any sleep because he's having these nightmares. This formula has been stolen again. Carnage breaks out of prison and comes back to New York. The Green Goblin, who is supposed to be dead, is apparently, he's being sighted all over New York City. Spider-Man's just got to deal with all of this. And I think this is just like a 2-book kind of thing. Carnage in New York and Goblin's Revenge go together. I don't think there's a third. I don't believe it's a trilogy. But Dean Wesley Smith, decent writer. So some good Spider-Man action. Then we have a book that I thought I had. And apparently I don't. I do not know why I am missing this book. But it is Angels and Visitations by Neil Gaiman. This is a collection of short stories. And there are some... I believe, I don't know if essays would be correct, but there are like some forewords that he wrote to, or introductions that he wrote to other people's books. Excuse me. But yeah, that's basically what it is. Just a collection of short fiction and nonfiction by Neil Gaiman. Really, really good stuff. It includes murder mysteries about a murder that takes place in heaven and all sorts of other good, really fun stories. A nice little buffet of Neil Gaiman's writings. Then we have Good Bones and Simple Murders by Margaret Atwood. And this is also a collection of short stories, poems. Not sure if there are essays in this one. It might be the only Margaret Atwood I've read. I don't recall. I know I haven't read Handmaid's Tale, which of course is her most famous. But this has, as I said, just a bunch of different types of writings from Margaret Atwood. Um, and apparently, I don't remember any of it, but looking online to see what this was about, I may have to take another peek because there's a story apparently about a bat telling somebody how Bram Stoker got the story of Dracula wrong. And that just sounds like something that's right up my alley. But that's Good Bones and Simple Murders by Margaret Atwood. Then we have Earthbound by Richard Matheson, and this is an erotic ghost story. So there's a couple, they're having trouble in their marriage, so they go to a place, like on a second honeymoon, they rent a place, and a mysterious woman shows up, and she's trying to seduce the husband, but, is she just some troublemaking hussy? Is it a ghost? There are problems from beyond the grave. I don't know that this is one of Richard Matheson's best, but it is Richard Matheson, so it's got to be at least decent. Excuse me a moment. Just going to do that. Then we have The Ultimate X-Men, edited by Stan Lee, and this is, I don't have it. I have other books in this series, but it's an anthology of X-Men stories by different authors with an illustration before each story. Good comic book prose. But I couldn't find it. When I tried to look it up to see, like, at least a list of the table of contents, Ultimate X-Men was a comic book eventually, and that's all that kept coming up was Ultimate, the comic book stuff, and not this book. But let's move on to the next book, Tanner of Pellucidar by Edgar Rice Burroughs. I believe this is the third book in the Pellucidar series. Pellucidar is the hidden world at the center of the earth. The earth is hollow, and there's a world inside it. And so David Innes, our American hero from the first two books, he and his cohorts basically have defeated the master race, for lack of a better term. They were these sort of saurian dinosaur creatures that enslaved everybody in Pellucidar. But they've been defeated, but now they have to contend with the Corsair pirates, if that's how you say it. And so one of the characters, Tanar, or Tanar, however you say his name, is captured by the pirates and has to, get free. It's crazy, fun pulp adventure from Edgar Rice Burroughs. And then we're swinging way over. The pendulum has swung, because next up is Snow Falling on Cedars by David Gutterson, or Gooderson. This is a New York Times best-selling, award-winning novel. And I assume I read it because somebody recommended it to me. But it takes place in 1954 on a tiny island near Puget Sound, I believe. And there's a murder, they find a dead fisherman. He's been murdered. And so it's a literary murder mystery, and there's generational stuff going on, and it deals with, there's a Japanese population on the island, and delves into what went on with them during World War II. I really don't remember much about it. It is a very well written book. I think probably pretty interesting, but nothing that I felt the need to go back to. But it was worth the read, I think. And then, we're going to swing back, because the next book was Hercules by the Sword by Timothy Boggs. This is based on the Hercules TV show, starring what's-his-name, who's like super religious now, Kevin Sorbo. That's it. I used to be a Kevin Sorbo fan. I liked Hercules, and he was Kull from the Robert E. Howard, the guy that created Conan. He also had a character named Call, who was played by Kevin Sorbo in a movie. But but now Kevin Sorbo, maybe he was super religious back then and just didn't have the platform. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. Hercules by the sword, Timothy Boggs, Hephaestus, if that's how you say it, has forged a sword for Zeus, but it is stolen, so Hercules has to find Zeus's stolen sword. And it's like reading an episode of the Hercules TV show, which was a fun adventure show. Hercules and Xena. They're fun little shows. And then finally, the last thing that I read in September of 1996 is Bodies of Water by Roseanne Cash of Johnny Cash fame. Roseanne Cash. So this is just a collection of short stories, poetry, autobiographical stories by Roseanne Cash. I'm assuming this is just something that I found at the library and thought it looked interesting and picked it up to read. But I really couldn't tell you much about it, except that it's a bunch of short stuff written by Roseanne Cash. And that's it. That is all I read in September of 1996. And I did not, as usual, think of a question again. So you know what? I'm going to ask a question suggested by Michael Booker, a regular viewer and commenter, and he suggested I ask, what is your first favorite book? Unfortunately, I don't remember if he said horror or just first favorite book. So we're going with, what is your first favorite book? Now, for me, it's a tough question to answer. When I was a little kid, I loved like the Encyclopedia Brown books. I loved the Danny Dunn books, the Hardy Boys. And then I had a book called Shudder or Shudders. That was an anthology of horror stories that I loved. But as I got older, I would say, if I had to, I would probably say the first book that I ever called a favorite. Well, there's a Spell for Chameleon. Or no, I'm sorry. The Source of Magic by Piers Anthony. The second Xanth book, but the first one that I read. And I enjoyed it so much that as soon as I finished it, I immediately went to the first page and started reading it again. I read it twice, straight through. So that was a favorite for a while. And then the thing I was going to say before that was The Light at the End by John Skipp and Craig Spector. I've read that book half a dozen times, I'd say, at least. Absolutely loved that book. Used to claim it was my favorite horror novel of all time. Until I read The Resurrectionist by Rath James White. And then there's things like A Prayer for the Dying by Jack Higgins. I've read that many, 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 many times. You're going to see coming up on this list as we go through. It's gonna start showing up every other month for a short time. So yeah, it's a difficult question to answer, I think. Thanks, Michael Booker. But I guess first favorite book, technically I probably have to say The Source of Magic by Piers Anthony. Yeah, that would have to be it. But then for most favorite, it would probably have to go to The Light at the End by Skip and Spector. possibly Tied with a Prayer for the Dying by Jack Higgins. I don't know. They're such completely different types of books. It's a tough question. But that's my rambling answer to the man. There's so many good books. Favorites, man. That's my rambling answer that may or may not actually answer the question, but let me know your first favorite book. Let me know down in the comments below. And if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post spoiler warning. We try to be polite here on my channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is at Rona5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, is Eric Smith5757. That's Eric with a K, ERIKSMITH 5757. That's all I've got for you this week. So until next week, read more books.